Last week, Fortnite added the North America Central server located in Dallas, Texas, meaning now that NA has 3 different servers to choose from. However, starting in Chapter 4 Season 2, competitive events will no longer be hosted on NA East and NA West server regions. Instead, tournaments in North America will be run on the NA Central servers. This has some massive upsides, but also a lot of downsides. So the current 3 servers that they have is NA East, NA West, and now NA Central. NA East is based in Virginia, NA West in California, and now the NA Central is going to be in Dallas, Texas. The benefit of this new server obviously is for people in the center of the US, as it suggests, but also gives players in Mexico access to being able to play Fortnite on reasonable ping. And if you're unaware, the population of Mexico is 129 million players, so this is a massive player base that now has access to play Fortnite on better servers. And Epic even stated that is one of the reasons that they're adding this server. We're thrilled to provide lower latency for many players residing in Mexico and the central US. This basically means if you're playing in North America, you have one of 3 servers to choose from, which if you're playing pubs or creative can only be a good thing. You have more options for better ping. However, from Chapter 4 Season 2 onwards, all competitive events are going to be held on the North America Central region, which causes a lot of issues. Now, this is actually pretty common for most games, but Fortnite is very different. If we take Valorant, for example, they have 6 servers in North America. Now, I don't play Valorant, so I don't know if this is exactly how it works by any means, but I'm presuming it picks the best server for all 10 people that are available. So of these 6, it'll choose whichever roughly gives the best ping. I'm sure it's a very flawed system from my small amount of research I've seen so far. It's not the best, but it works relatively well because there's 10 players. When you put 100 players into one lobby, you're not going to be able to have one of these 3 servers picked, and I'm guessing that's why just Central is chosen as the main server for competitive. This obviously does mean that all players from West and East are combined going forward, but similarly this is what most esports do, just have one North American region. So let's first focus up on the positives. Number 1. Higher quality of gameplay overall for North America. Combining all of the players together, of course, means that the best players are now going against a higher caliber overall. If we look at EU, one of the reasons that it is the most dominant is because it has such a large player base overall, which means it's more competitive, which means you get better practice. And even if you're just playing arena, you're going to be fighting better players, playing scrims, you're going to be playing against higher level strategies. And of course, in tournaments, you're going to be pushed over and over. And that difficulty means that the best of the best get better. When you're in smaller regions, it's significantly more difficult for them to get practice, and in places like NA West in particular, these players do not have the best practice because no matter how hard they try, some of the players just aren't going to be that good. So combining NA East and NA West together means that the overall skill of North America over time will increase more rapidly because you're going to have the best players from West going against the best players from East, and overall at the top level, there's going to be more better players. I think this is really important because earlier in Fortnite's development, NA East was seen as a major region, and EU was kind of just rubbish, just W keys, aggressive players to the side. And over time that's changed where EU is so dominant and NA is still good. I'm not trying to say they're bad by any means, but I think NA East has fallen far behind the skill level of EU. So combining with West now kind of strengthens their power as a region overall and just makes things a little bit more interesting going into international competitions. Another very high positive of this is we potentially may see a lot of snake innings happening next season where some of the best players from NA West will join up with some of the best players from NA East. For example, could you imagine like an Epic Whale playing with someone like Booga? That could be an absolutely fantastic team, and I'm sure there's a lot of other combinations that could possibly go together, but some of them that are possible are very interesting, and I'm sure we're going to see a bunch of West players combining with East going into next season and maybe for the rest of the year as well. And I think overall the biggest takeaway here and the biggest positive is that if you are not a competitive player, if you're a pubs player, in particular if you're someone who just focuses on zero build, this is nothing but a positive change for you. Only good comes from this. There's more servers you can play on, there's better ping overall. If it's pubs, I mean, queue times aren't really that much of an issue, and if they become an issue on one server, say for example NA West, you can still play on Central, you'll get higher ping, but for zero build, it doesn't really matter. So for zero build and for pub players, this is just an undoubtedly good decision. I've seen some people say that this is a financial decision by Epic Games in order to get rid of NA East and NA West so that they can save money and just have one central server, but that doesn't necessarily appear to be what's happening at all. If you read into the blog post, it's pretty clear that they intend on keeping the NA East and NA West servers. I mean, at least right now, that's what I read it as, which means that there's just going to be 3 servers. This is actually going to be more expensive to run rather than cheaper to run, so they're spending more money. However, they're making more money by having more players from Mexico Mexico and the central of US have better ping and want to be able to play the game more. So it's not necessarily a money saving exercise by removing 2 regions, it's just that they're adding another region to allow more players from around the world to be able to play and make money from. Of course, the relatively small community of competitive players is who's being impacted by it combining into central, whereas for pubs it's just, I mean, play whatever server you get the best ping to. Alright, but what about the downsides? There's a lot of positives, I agree it's cool in a lot of areas, but there are a lot of negatives for competitive. Let's start with number 1. Everyone has worse ping. If you look at the population density map of the USA, you'll notice that the majority of players and just people, I say players, they're people that live in the USA, live over to the east side. And on the west coast, there's a smaller amount, but that's also where another cluster players are. So you have this large amount of split of players on each side, and then putting a server down in the middle in Texas means that on average, players are just going to have worse ping. Again, on other esports, this isn't necessarily as big of a problem because ping isn't as important, but in Fortnite, there's a big difference between 0 ping and 30 ping, 30 ping and 60 ping. I know, I can already hear the comments, I can smell them out already. We need South Africa servers, we need Southeast Asian servers as well. I get it, you want them, but that's not the topic of this video. From what I've seen so far, ping from Virginia, where 0 ping currently is for any East players, is now around 35 to connect to Central, and I'm guessing from West it's roughly the same. So I've seen a lot going between 25 to 40. So this is a massive difference from a lot of the players previously playing on 0 ping. But what does this mean for the larger competitive sphere? Well, then, quite frankly, this means that players who move towards Texas and into Dallas, in particular tier 1s who end up moving there, will have a significant advantage because they're going to have 30 ping better than the majority of players there. And I foresee this meaning that the region is going to become significantly more aggressive because you have a large amount of highly skilled low ping players going against the majority of people who are going to have higher ping. Man, that's a wall replace central. So those people are going to have a massive advantage overall across the rest of the North America region. This also means that Canada players are going to have significantly worse ping because of course Dallas is on the south side of the USA, which means that Canada is going to struggle. I've seen a lot of players saying that they're getting around 70 to 80 ping on average, and this creates a massive problem because if you live within the US, you can move to another state. It's a big ask, especially for a lot of the players who are still teenagers, who are still young, who live with their parents. But if you're in Canada, this means you have visa issues to worry about. You're not just moving state, you're moving country, which is significantly more difficult. So for players like Pamstu and Fatch, players in that kind of region, they're going to struggle so much more. And yeah, maybe you're going to have to start maining 0 build. So I've already seen the high IQ guys like Epic Whale from West. I think Reet is also looking to move to Dallas. So they're going to have a massive advantage being on 0 ping. But of course, they're also going to be coming across higher level players too, which, you know, I do think it's going to be a good thing. But again, this is a massive advantage for the players who are living in Dallas. Time zones is going to be another problem. If you live on the east or the west coast, there's roughly a 3-hour time difference between the two of these, which means that if you have a tournament that starts too early, it might get into the point where players are either at school or work. If you put it too late, on the other coast, it's going to be where players are trying to go to bed and sleep. So there's a real difficulty in overlapping tournaments here to make them work for the entire region. But I think the main thing that's going to happen here is that you're going to have to only have 1-round tournaments in a specific day. If you have multiple round tournaments, 2 rounds like an FNCS or something like that, there's almost no way that you can get a 7-hour tournament to fit into it one evening for both regions. It's just not going to work. Another thing we need to consider that's going to be a massive problem is arena queue times. On any West already, because it's a relatively small region, arena queue times are already struggling. So what are they going to do going forward? If a lot of the players move to Central or start playing on the Central servers, this means that there's going to be even less players playing on the NA West server, meaning that the arena queues are going to be, basically unplayable at specific times. And I hear that's already the case prior to this move. So what are some of the solutions to these difficult problems? Well, I think for arena, number 1, I think one of the best solutions will either be one of 2 things. Only having North America Central arena, which I know will make things very frustrating for a lot of players, I guess specifically those Canadian players, or the very far up north players who are going to get just worse ping over and over, and that will struggle. But I think that'll solve a lot of queue time issues overall. Now, I don't necessarily think that's the best idea, but I think that is one solution. I think what would be better is if you could actually select more than one region when you're trying to search. So for example, rather than just searching for arena on North American Central, you can search for it on West and Central and be put into one of the two games based on what the ping would be best for across the average players. I think this would solve probably the majority of problems for queue times for arena and would still allow you to have local tournaments hosted on West, East, or North America Central for third parties and have good ping for those specific regions. What's the solution for Canadian players? Man, for competitive, I think this is a real loss for them. Quite frankly, it's one of two things. One of three things. Play on high ping, play zero build only and main that as your focus, or move, which is really bad. I feel very sad for the Canadian players as a lot of them are just going to be seriously disadvantaged now. But again, on the flip side, there's of course a lot more Mexican players who are now going to be able to play on this server. So there's positives and there's negatives. For time, just don't run 2-round events on the same day. I think that's a relatively simple solution, but it'll be hard to fit all of those tournaments into one specific week. But with some good planning, hopefully that can be sorted. And for the tier 1 players, if you really want to compete, I think I don't want to say have to move to Dallas, but I think it's going to be almost a requirement for people who want to consistently win FNCS over and over again, in particular those ones who are looking to qualify for the international at the end of the year. Let me know what you guys think about the server changes. I'm sure it's impacting a lot of you as I have a lot of viewers from the US out there. So in particular, tell me where you live and what your ping is, and not your specific address. I don't want to know that. Like and subscribe. Peace.